Welcome to Moveable Dough. This is Steve Danielson. Each week on Moveable Dough, I sit down with a composer to talk about their lives, their musical journeys, and, of course, their music. Come with me as we explore each unique path into composition and what they have to share with the world. For a complete archive of episodes, as well as access to the shorter segments called Movable Snippets, visit my website, sdcompose.com/movabledough. Hey, this is Steve. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Moveable Dough. My guest today is Jessica French. Jessica is an award-winning composer specializing in choral music. Her works have been commissioned and performed by ensembles such as Seattle Pro Musica, Ember Choral Arts, Pacific Lutheran University Chorale, Opus 7 Vocal Ensemble, and just had her most recent piece, Awake, O Sun, premiered 2 Sundays ago by the Ohio State Chorale. Jessica is also section leader at St. James Cathedral in Seattle and was named their composer in residence for their 2021-22 season. Jessica French, welcome to Moveable Dough.
Thanks so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here. Really
Fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Well, you live up the road from me. I'm in Lacey, Washington, near Olympia. You're just up the road in Seattle. But I know you didn't start in Seattle. So where are you from originally?
Yeah. So I'm actually from Salt Lake City, Utah, originally. And my whole family is from there. So I've moved around a lot, but that's where I grew up originally. My parents, I did have kind of a musical background, both from my parents and their parents. So
Okay.
it's kind of a mixture of things. Yeah. So
what sort of musical background did they provide you?
Well, so my on my mom's side, my grandpa was an opera singer, and he actually was in San Francisco for a long time.
Okay.
And then he met my grandma. He was in the Navy for a while. And then they moved to Salt Lake, and he continued to take piano lessons for a while. And my grandma played the piano and did a lot of that too. My mom's a singer-songwriter, so she does a lot of kind of folk / alternative rock kind of styles, blues a little bit. And it's funny, my dad and my mom actually met in an 80s band.
Oh, really?
My dad, it was called the Crazy Jane Band. So my dad and his brothers had this band, and my mom auditioned in college to be the backup singer. So I have a big mixture of musical styles kind of in my family.
That's cool. So were there a lot of 80s rock in your household growing up?
Definitely. U2, Peter Gabriel, that kind of stuff. And I still love that music. I still listen to it a lot. So
Very nice.
yeah, so that's kind of, the mixture of things. And on my dad's side, his dad sang in the choir at the cathedral downtown in Salt Lake. So there's a different type of music, but that was also an influence there too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw that you studied at the Madeline Choir School. So what sort of training did you receive there?
Yeah, so that was a really great place. It was an after school program, kind of like a lot of chorus programs you see around, in different churches. So I think we had rehearsal maybe once or twice a week, and then we sing once a month. But when I was going into 7th grade, they turned it into a full-time choir school, kind of modeled after a lot of those European choir schools in, like in England, like, Westminster Choir, Cathedral Choir, things like that. So a lot of us were at different schools, and we left those schools to go to the choir school. And it was brand new. It was in the basement of the cathedral. So it was, we had like small classes. It was like 22 of us. And, it was completely new. But it really, changed the way I look at music and kind of formed my musicianship. And we sang music from, Gregorian chant up to present day music at a very high level. And we started rehearsing daily, singing masses daily, Sunday masses, etc. So it was, a big shift in my musical life.
Yeah. Was that an all-girls school, I imagine?
It was actually co-ed, and I think it's still one of the only co-ed choir schools, Catholic co-ed choir schools specifically, in the country. Because I know there's a men and boys choir school in Boston, I think, but it's still just for boys. So yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing from your online bio that I didn't mention earlier is that your education and training is mostly in organ performance. Bachelor degree from Indiana University, master's from Yale. So first of all, how did you get started on organ?
Yeah. So the way I started was, it was while I was at the cathedral. I'd been playing the piano since I was around 7, and that was kind of a big focus of mine. But I remember, I was starting to get surrounded by organ music because we would sing all the time and be accompanied by it, and hymns and service music and anthems and all that. But we would always be on the far end of the cathedral, behind the altar singing, and the organ is in its stereotypical place up in the loft, across.
Right.
And I was always kind of enthralled by that big sound. And I was a very quiet kid. I'm still a quiet person, but like there's something inside me that like wanted to make that noise. I don't know why. I want to do that. And I remember we were doing a recording session up there for a CD because we didn't really sing much in the loft, but that was one time we were. And during the break, we actually got to walk around and I got to see the organ console for the first time.
Okay.
And I got to see, oh, it has more than one keyboard. It's got 4 of them, and it's got a pedal, the whole keyboard for your feet, and it's got all these buttons. And like I was just kind of overwhelmed, but also just like fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And just actually see what it looked like. And a friend of mine was taking organ lessons at the time with the organist there at the cathedral, and I was too shy to ask him to take lessons. So I asked my friend to ask him, which I appreciate. So anyway, then I started taking lessons, and I just like took to it immediately. I was obsessed. And I started learning all the repertoire I could for the organ. And to the point where, I think it was like my second year of high school, the person I was studying with was like, you need to start looking at, schools. I think you should go into organ performance. And I had never heard of like, what's organ performance, but he started explaining to me like what this degree would be and what you'd be doing. And so that's kind of where it went. And I suddenly put my whole life into the organ. Like that was my plan. My plan was organist and get these degrees and then either be a director of music at a big cathedral and or concertize, do recitals. But it changed. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that change. So I know you still do write for organ. You were commissioned to compose some works for the American Guild of Organists for their Seattle convention in 2022, but you call yourself mostly a choral composer now. So why the change from organ to choral?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people always ask me that for good reason. So long story short, I had this plan. I did my 2 degrees. Once I finished at Yale, I went to New York. I had a church job there. And then I went to another really pretty well-known church job. And for me, I was like, I finally, hit that milestone where I'm like, I'm at that big name church job. I'm, doing the thing. I'm an organist. And for various reasons, a lot of things just weren't working out. I was starting to get a lot of chronic pain when I played. And I was trying to do everything I could to figure out what was going on. And it just was getting worse and worse. And basically, when I was at this job, like everything fell apart. My musical life, my personal life, like it was all just not working. And so it was kind of a time where it was, for me, it was new because I felt like I had no control. I was like, what am I going to do here? And the funny thing is my parents happened to move to Seattle around that time. My dad got a job here and that was unexpected. Like they were planning to just stay in Salt Lake City, for the rest of their lives. And when all this stuff kind of fell apart and I kind of had the realization that I just couldn't keep playing like this because I was just in pain a lot when I play and it just wasn't sustainable, basically. So I moved here, like not knowing anyone really and not knowing what to do. And so I kind of I had the luxury of having some time to kind of figure things out. And I knew I wanted to keep singing. Like singing has always been a big part of me, a choral singer. And lucky for me, Seattle has tons of choirs. And so I was easily able to find some connections and get a church job and start singing in some choirs here. But beyond that, I had to figure out, well, what else can I do if I can't play the organ regularly, And I always had this desire to compose, but I never really had the time to pursue it beyond like learning how improvisation and, things that you do in church music stuff. But I finally decided to just start trying to write some choral anthems. So I just did it like on the side for fun. But then I, thought, I think I want to take some lessons and figure out if I can do more with this. And so I actually got someone put me in touch with John Muleisen. And I still study with him to this day. He's a phenomenal composer and mentor and friend. And he luckily was specifically writing choral music because that was my big draw, because that's my whole world, church music and choral music. But also organ music eventually. But I was really focused on choral music because that still is like my biggest passion. And so I was able to get in touch with him, and then I started lessons. And it was it was a long process. I had a lot to learn. But he really helped me find my compositional voice, I think, because I still didn't quite know what it was that I wanted to do with it. So anyway, that's kind of how it morphed into that. It was completely not planned. I was not planning to be a composer at all. I was planning to be an organist. But now I look back and I'm kind of glad it went the way it did, because I feel like the organ was kind of one of those tools or stepping stones that brought me here to what I'm doing now. Um, and I miss playing it. I really still miss playing the organ a lot. I just can't do it on a regular basis.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something that I know people have asked you about before. So I saw online that you have synesthesia.
Hmm.
I know that different people experience this in different ways from other people. Can you describe your ability and how it affects your compositional process?
Yeah. So synesthesia is a kind of a cool phenomenon. It's basically a linking of senses in the brain. So people have it in various forms. The one I have it in a few forms. Mainly, it's I associate colors with words, with names. So like names have a color, days of the week have a color, numbers have a color. But even more fun, have it with sonorities, with notes. So each note, like if
Uh-huh.
I like map out for you a scale, each note has its own color. So when I hear an A, I see green. And so using those is kind of fun for composing, because it's almost like you have this, this palette of colors that you choose from. And it gets overwhelming because there's a lot of different things that can change the colors. But
Sure.
I use it to my advantage. And a lot of it is intuitive. I've just been doing this for years and not realizing that it was a thing. But now that I know it's a thing, I try to use that in my composition. And so it helps me make decisions on what key center I might choose, or what sonority I might choose, or what chord, based on the colors I see. So that's
Sure.
in a nutshell what it is.
Well, that's awesome because I feel different keys in different ways, but to actually see keys in different ways, I think is a really cool ability.
Yeah, it's fun. And what I hope is, like, I know people can't see, because I've talked to other synesthetes that have it, and usually they have a different palette than everyone else has.
Hmm.
But I know people can't see the specific colors that I'm seeing, but my hope is they'll feel the general shift anyway. Like,
Yeah.
almost like a kaleidoscope, it's going into one area and then it shifts to something else. And when people sing my music, a lot of the times it's kind of daunting, because it'll be in one key for like 5 measures, and then suddenly it shifts and has all these accidentals, and it looks like, oh my gosh, but once they learn it, it makes sense. But that's usually why. It's because it's shifting into a different color area.
Uh-huh.
So
Very cool.
yeah.
So, in addition to composing, you also run the French press, which, contrary to what some may believe by the name, has nothing to do with coffee.
Yeah,
Though doing a Google search, I did find a coffee house called the French Press. So if you want to go there for a cappuccino, they might have it for you. Uh,
nice.
so what is your French press?
Yeah, so my French press is, it was funny. It was just a random idea I had a few years ago when I was first starting to try to put my music out there and learning about self-publishing. And I just, for fun, on one of my score covers, I had my piece title in the center, and I had Jessica French on the top. And then I thought, oh, I'll just put the French press. Why not? And it was funny because it was kind of like, I don't know, when you have a new outfit or a new shirt and then you get a lot of compliments on it, and you weren't expecting it. Like that's what I was getting with this. I was getting random choir members coming up to me saying, I love that name. That's so clever. And I'm like, I know, I guess I came up with it, but it was just random. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll work on using this, because it seems like it's catching on and people remember it. And so I kind of, I'm still like trying to perfect the way I'm doing my self marketing and all that. But like I just finally got a new logo for it just a couple months ago when I went to ACDA, when I did the composer fair. So it's fun to kind of have your own brand and work with that and see
Mhm.
where it takes you. So
Yeah. So what advantages or disadvantages do you see towards self-publishing?
yeah, I think the advantages are that, for one, I get to kind of personalize it the way I like. I have my own logo, my own colors, my own ideas for it. I also feel like I can have more of a personal relationship with the singers or the conductors who want to program my music, because when they order my piece, they go to I send them an invoice and they do all the stuff, but I usually have to communicate with them. And I like to kind of ask them, so where'd you hear about this piece? Or what were you looking for? And so I can kind of personalize it and have
Uh-huh.
a relationship with them. I think the downside is there's more work involved. Like, I have a few pieces published traditionally, and I love the places where I haven't published. They're great companies, and they do all the work. Like, they do all the marketing and they put it out there. I don't have to do a thing. But of course, with my music, I have to do all of it. And
Right.
there's the imposter syndrome thing. Like sometimes I don't really like promoting myself. I don't like to be like, hey, here's my stuff. But I know I need to do it so people can hear about my new pieces. So it's kind of, there's pros and cons to it.
Sure. So here's a question I like to ask composers sometimes.
Yeah.
If you had sort of unlimited time, unlimited resources, could just write whatever you'd like and you'd have the money for it, what would be your dream composition?
I think I really want to write a multi-movement piece, maybe like a 20 to 30-minute piece with strings or
Uh-huh.
and choir. I think it's just I feel like that's in my future at some point. I've had the chance to write smaller pieces for choir and strings, and I loved it. It just opened up the whole new door for me, and I'm like, I want to do more of that. I also really have enjoyed collaborating with some poets, some living poets like Tony Silvestri and Robert Bodie, who's an amazing conductor, but he's also a poet. I kind of feel like I'd like to collaborate with someone and maybe find a sacred text, or maybe it's based on chant or something. I don't know, but like those are kind of the things that are bubbling in my brain. I would love to do
Uh-huh.
something like that.
Well,
So
good. We'll look for it in the future.
yeah, hopefully.
So when you sit down to write a new piece, how long does it typically take you to write, like from beginning to end?
It's interesting. It depends on the piece. I mean, these days, most of the pieces I write are like between 3 and 5 minutes long. If I can have like 3 months, it's great, but I know that's usually a luxury because I'm lucky, I'm getting more commissions, so I have to write faster. Um, but because most of my pieces are self-published, I also have to do all the engraving and all the editing. So I try to leave myself plenty of wiggle room to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I get the piece, I really try to memorize the text and without playing it or singing or anything, and just really um, figure out what the text means, and because that's usually when the melodies kind of organically come to me. Um, so that takes a week or so, maybe. I don't know. It depends. Sometimes I get inspiration right away, and I'm like, oh, I got to write this down. So I'd say 2 months is probably nice if I can for a 3 to 5 minute piece. But sometimes life is crazy, and I don't have that time, and I just have to fast. So
So
yeah.
when you're not musicking, what do you like to do for fun? Do you have hobbies or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm working more than I should, but I, I have some hobby. I think I mean I'll put singing as a hobby as well. I mean, as part of my work, but I sing in some choirs around Seattle just because it's just something I love to do and I'm always going to keep doing. I'm starting to really like traveling now that I'm able to
Mm.
go to places that I've never been before, and I like to bring my husband with me because we both like traveling, and so just going to new places that I never thought I would go or wouldn't have the chance to go to otherwise. And I like hiking. I'm not an avid like, outdoorsy person, but I do love the Pacific Northwest and I love the climate. And so when I can, I try to find a new trail to explore. So
Yeah,
those are
you're
kind of
in
the main things.
you're in a good place for the outdoors, I can tell you that.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, before we take a quick break, I'm going to ask you, Jessica, to play a quick game that this week we're calling What's Your Favorite Instrument? Cannons. I'm going to ask you 5 true or false questions about Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. You're a winner just for playing the game, so just do your best.
Okay.
All right. All right. True or false? Tchaikovsky conducted the inaugural concert at the Berlin Opera House.
Gosh, I feel like I should know this. Um, I'm going to say false.
That is false. He actually conducted the inaugural concert at Carnegie Hall, May 5th, 1891.
Oh, cool.
All right. Number 2. Despite the fame of being a world-class composer and conductor, Tchaikovsky suffered from stage fright.
I'm going to say true.
That is true. After the Carnegie Hall performance, he swore off conducting because it was too strenuous for his nerves.
I can relate to that. I don't
All
feel so
right.
alone anymore.
Number 3, true or false? He felt that the 1812 overture was too loud.
I'm gonna say false.
It's actually true. He
Oh.
despised the sound of the cannons and how it made the piece sound.
That's funny.
Like, way to go, Peter. Come on.
Yeah, right.
All right. Number 4, true or false? When he was 4 years old, he collaborated on writing a song with his younger sister, Alexandra.
I'll say true.
That is true. And he began piano lessons the next year.
Oh,
So
cool.
he started composing first.
Uh-huh. Very cool.
All right. And number 5, true or false? In his final years, Tchaikovsky began to walk his large estate and collect unusual pebbles.
I'll say true.
That one's actually false. He would walk his property foraging and collecting mushrooms.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I guess it had a bunch on his property.
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, thank you for playing the game. You did a wonderful job. And again, like I said, you're a winner just for playing.
Thank you. Good. I'm glad.
All right. We're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we'll listen to some of Jessica's compositions. Hey, this is Steve. I know you're sitting here listening to Moveable Dough and you're thinking to yourself, how could I make a podcast, Steve? Well, let me tell you. Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. Okay, here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or your computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you could start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I've really enjoyed the flexibility that it allows me in creating my podcast. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome back. This is Steve Danielson. I'm talking today with Jessica French. We are going to start today with Tantum Ergo for SATB in Oregon. This piece was premiered in August 2021 as choirs are beginning their journey out of pandemic protocols. This piece also has a good example of your organ writing. So tell us more about this piece and what it means to you writing at such a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah, so what I love about this piece is there was a lot of unexpected things that happened. This was one piece that was not a commission. And yeah, it was during the pandemic when, choirs were timid, starting to come out and sing again, but it was still kind of, things were closing and then they were open and closing, so it was kind of this thing where it was unsure. And I had some time on my hands and I was like, I really want to write something that I just want to write, and also when I saw people, especially on social media, there were, like church musicians and conductors saying, I need pieces that are, for smaller groups, where our singers are still socially distanced or we're wearing masks, things like that. And I need something that we can put together quickly. And this Tantum Ergo, I actually remember in high school when I took an AP music class, I had kind of composed the melody to it for that class. And I still had it in my head and I never really did anything with it. And I remember for years in the back of my mind thinking, one day I want to kind of resurrect that and see what happens with it. So I did. And I really did not expect, it's really funny because I've had commissions, I've had choirs promote my music and I've been used to that. But like when I put it out there on Facebook, because I kind of wrote and said, hey, choir directors, I've got this new piece. It's a short anthem. You can learn it quickly. It felt weird putting myself out there. It was because it was like, this time I'm the one that's saying, hey, I've got this new thing, so I forced myself to finish it and that took a while. And so it was an experiment. And what's so funny, it's become my highest selling piece. Wow. And I think it's partially because, choirs were starting to sing it as they were coming out of the pandemic. In fact, my friend David Sinnen, he's the director of music at a Episcopal church in St. Louis. And he said, can we be the ones to premiere it? And I'm like, sure. So they actually were the ones that premiered it. And there's a video of them singing it at their service. And that really is what put it on the map. And the choir just really enjoyed singing the piece. And I made a version for treble choir as well. And so actually the choir school, they were singing it as well. And then suddenly a lot of groups that at choir camps and, summer festivals, a lot of youth choirs were singing it. And so a lot of kids were getting exposed to this piece and they really enjoyed it. And so, I don't know, it was just meaningful for me to see all these choirs, different churches that I had never, people I hadn't talked to before, new places. And it actually kind of got the ball rolling for my music to be out there, really. Especially in the church music world. And it was completely unexpected. I just thought it was just going to be a fun little anthem that a few people would do every once in a while. So, yeah.
That's awesome. All right. We are now going to listen to Tantum Ergo performed by the Cathedral Choir of St. John the Baptist in Savannah, Georgia, with Paul Thornock, conductor. right. Our second piece today, Strengthen for Service for SATB and String Quintet, as you mentioned, one of your pieces for strings. So I understand you wrote this for an anniversary of the Madeline Choir School where you studied in your youth. Tell us what it meant to receive the commission and what this piece is about.
Yeah, it was extremely meaningful. I mean, this was for their 25th anniversary, and I was, honored to be asked to write for such a thing, such an occasion. So Greg Glenn, the founder of the choir school, he sent me this text, and the good thing was when I read it, it was a text that I had already sung. We had sung it, at the choir school by a different composer. And so it was nice that it was already familiar to me. So there was already some nostalgia there and kind of memories of the choir school. I mean, they were there already, but to have a text that I had also sung there, it kind of things felt like they were coming around full circle. And but what I had to do is make sure that the setting that I had in my head, I had to really try and push that away, because I always have this fear that I'm going to channel a piece by another composer in my music and not realize it, So I really tried my best to do my own, make my own setting of it. And I think the text is just a really beautiful text. I mean, it's mainly about service. I think, especially in it within the church, like what church musicians can do to bring the service to God. And I think it's just a beautiful text about renewal and strength, of course. And so I really tried to bring out those aspects, and it talks a lot about light as well. So I really tried to hopefully bring those out, and you might hear essences of that in the piece. And it's neat how it's progressed, because now I've been asked to write various versions of it for other types of ensembles, and was not expecting it to go in that direction, but it's kind of fun to see how things morph and change. So
Yeah. So how did you go about making sure that you didn't sort of copy the setting that was in your head? Like, what did you do to separate yourself?
yeah, so first I did my process that I try to do each time, is I really sat with the text, even though it was familiar to me. I made sure to memorize it and speak it to myself. And I knew that's it's actually a Richard Prue setting. That's the one I remember. And I knew it in my head, but I just really, especially when the piece was done, I made sure to go back and listen and make sure there was nothing that was similar to his piece. But honestly, once I really spend time with the text and do the process, it usually comes to me naturally. And it was funny. I get these ideas, and I don't know where they come from. They're inspiration, I guess. And the opening motive of the piece, you'll hear this kind of opening ostinato, kind of quintal chordal almost. It came to me as I was about to fall asleep. It was very inconvenient, because I really just wanted to, and that's usually when these ideas come, and it's probably because I'm very relaxed. But it was only a few days after I received the text, and I got up, and my favorite app on the iPhone is the Voice Memos app, because I can I went downstairs and I played it on the piano and I sang it and I put it in there. And I do that a lot. And a lot of times these ideas are nothing. They don't mean anything, and they're not, but I'm glad I captured that one, because that's kind of the essence of the piece. You'll hear that ostinato come through at various times in the piece. So that's kind of where it began. And then it just, like any piece I write, it usually just, I don't know where it's going. I just kind of follow the direction it goes. And then there it is. So
Awesome.
yeah.
All right. Well, we are now going to listen to Strengthen for Service. All right, our third piece today, Earth Strike Up Your Music for SATB and Orchestra. So this is a beautiful Christmas anthem, and I believe you won an award for this one, yes?
I did. So this was the E.C. Shermer Choral Publishing Award that the AGO does every 2 years for their national convention. And as part of the award, you get the premiere. You get to have it premiered at the convention.
That's
Uh,
very cool.
it was really cool, and it was neat because the text is a Christina Rossetti Christmas text.
Yeah.
And Joseph Adam, who's the director of music at St. James, and he's the one. They're the people that actually premiered it. He actually sent me this ad in the Organist magazine and said you should apply for this competition. And it was funny because I had just finished setting another Christina Rossetti Christmas text, Love Came Down at Christmas. So I thought, this is too much of a coincidence. Okay, I should try. We'll see what happens. And it was great timing because it was during the pandemic and everything was, not great. And to get I got a random call. I thought it was spam, but it turns out it was, the AGO from New York and said, hey, you won this competition. So it was great because I like the way this competition was structured, because instead of you writing this obscure piece and then seeing if you win, it's, send us a concept of how you would, set this text and what you would do with it. And so it gave me a project to work on. It gave me something to do during the pandemic, when we're all home every day and going crazy. Like, it was something to work toward. And the hope was in 2 years, choirs will be able to sing again. And so it kind of really gave me that hope, almost like the hope of Advent, like the waiting. It kind of felt like it was fitting to write music to this particular text during that time.
All right. Well, we are now going to listen to Earth Strike Up Your Music, here performed by the orchestra and cantori at St. Olaf College with James Bobb conductor. All right, our last piece today, O Star of Strength for SSA and piano. So this is a setting of a text by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow that, as you say on your website, explores the journey to one's inner strength and resilience. So how does this piece accomplish that purpose?
Yeah, so the way this came about was I wrote this for Seattle Girl Choir was celebrating their 40th anniversary, and they wanted, a new piece for that. And Jake Winkler, who was the artistic director there at the time, said he wants the girls to kind of to pick the text. We want us, because usually it's a conductor has a text in mind, or you have a donor that has a text, or the composer chooses the text. But he wanted the girls to be part of that process, and I thought that was a really neat way of exploring that. So he had me come in one day and we all kind of brainstormed, and we were talking about themes, like what kind of theme do they want for their piece. And a lot of them wanted something to do with space, of all things. They just like whether it's the planets or the stars or traveling to space. That was the consensus. So after we talked about that, we came across a few texts, and then everyone had to vote on like their favorites, and this one was one of the favorites, and it was definitely my number one favorite. And the poem is actually called A Light of Stars. And so it's really, it's actually about Mars specifically, and that's what the Star of Strength is referencing.
Okay.
But whenever I look at a poem, I try to look at the underlying meaning behind it, beyond just this text painting of Mars in this, dark sky. Beyond this, I think he says in the cold light of stars. It's very, I love the poem. It's very vivid, but he talks about, "O star of strength, I see thee rise and smile upon my pain." And when I read that line, I thought, this is the crux of the poem, and I need to call it "O Star of Strength." And so that's why it's called that. And,
Okay.
and the last part, it says, "Oh, thou beckonest with thy mailed hand, and I am strong again." And when they finish the piece, they're singing, "I am strong." They end on the word strong. And so I think for them, it was very empowering because, number one, they were just coming back, singing as a group that first year, because everything was on Zoom before and it was in and out, back and forth, and a lot of them, this would be their final concert as a chorister there before they would graduate and go on to wherever they're going. So I think it had a lot of meaning to them in that sense, as well as just, a beautiful poem that was depicting Mars. But I think that was the main reason. So
Yeah, I love that ending. I am strong. I am strong.
yeah.
I think that's great. Okay, well, we are going to listen to O Star of Strength performed here by the Seattle Girls Choir with Jacob Winkler, conductor.
Silently, oh silent.
Jessica, what are you working on now that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I am currently working on a piece for a girl chorister course that's happening in New York City this summer. So speaking of choir schools, there is a choir school at St. Thomas Fifth Ave in New York City.
Okay.
It's Thomas Men and Boys Choir School. Um, so every summer they have a girl chorister course. I think it's been around for maybe 10 years now. So that summer, girls from all over the country can come over and sing evensong every day and have the life of a chorister,
Uh-huh.
And so this year they asked me to be their composer in residence, and so they're going to be singing a few of my pieces, but they also are commissioning me to write a piece for this course, and so it's going to be called "At Heaven's Proclamation." It's a text about the Transfiguration, and it's actually the poet her name's Mechtilde of Magdeburg. I think she's a 12th century mystic, so it's just a really neat. It's a really neat.
That is quite the name.
It is quite the name, isn't it? I was like, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I think but anyway, so that's what I'm working on now, and I'm looking forward to that premiere. So
Awesome. So if my listeners do want to learn more about you and the French press, where can they find you online?
yeah, so you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And then my website's just jessicafrench.net. So you can just find more. So
Fantastic. And hey, listeners out there, are you enjoying today's episode? Do you enjoy hearing these interviews each and every week? Become a subscribing member for less than $1 a month. Your support helps me keep the music moving. If you're wanting to support the show but not sure you want a monthly commitment, you can Venmo me $1 or so to show appreciation for what you hear on these podcasts. Visit sdcompose.com/movabledough for more information. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today on Moveable Dough.
Thanks so much, Steve. It was so much fun.
My guest today was composer Jessica French. If you have a recommendation for a future guest or an idea for the show, please email me at moveabledough@gmail.com. This is Steve Danielson. Keep the music moving.